Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
They called my name, and I heard it, clear, crisp, echoing through the auditorium. But I didn't move right away. I sat there for a second too long, just breathing, staring down at the row of glossy black caps bobbing in front of me, like a synchronized sea of ambition. My hands were damp from clutching the edge of my robe, and the corners of the program booklet were curled from how tightly I'd been holding it. I wasn't nervous, not exactly. It was more like the weight of everything, the years, the debt, the long nights working double shifts at the diner and triple checking lab submissions. Suddenly decided to crawl up my spine all at once. This day, this damn degree, this was supposed to be the end of all of that. The finish line, the proof that I didn't just survive, I earned every second of this. So when I finally stood, I made myself smile. I walked across that stage with shoulders back, chin up, just like Dr. Morales told me in our last one-on-one. Own the moment, Jenna, she'd said. Don't just survive it. I shook hands with the dean, grabbed the empty diploma holder they hand you for show, and let the applause wash over me. Not loud, not show-stopping, but mine. Real, honest, the kind of clap that says, "Hey, you made it, good job." That would have been enough. It should have been enough. But then she showed up. I had just taken my seat again, fixing my cap for the millionth time, when I heard the rustle behind me, my mom whispering to someone, my dad letting out a chuckle like someone just told him an inside joke. I didn't turn around at first. I was still soaking it all in. And then the speaker on stage adjusted the mic and said, "And now a very special message from someone who knows firsthand what perseverance truly means." I remember the way my stomach clenched. That word, perseverance. Too clean, too rehearsed. I looked up. Rachel, my sister, walked on stage in a navy blazer and skinny jeans, like she was auditioning for a TED Talk. Her hair curled into those perfect Instagram waves, one heel clicking slightly out of rhythm with the other. She didn't belong up there. She wasn't a graduate. Hell, she hadn't even finished her junior year. She dropped out 6 years ago. One day she was studying nursing, the next she was gone. Some guy, some road trip, a whole lot of finding herself. But now here she was, walking to the mic with her arms outstretched like she'd just come home from war. The crowd clapped politely. My parents were on their feet before she even opened her mouth. She took a breath, put her hand to her chest like a damn Oscar winner, and said, "Thank you. I wasn't expecting to speak today, but I felt compelled." And that's when I knew. I'd read that opening before, a blog post. From a veteran, I think. Someone who lost his legs in combat and wrote about crawling back to hope. It had gone viral 2 years ago. I remembered because I'd cried reading it at 2 a.m. during finals week, exhausted and alone in the library. And now Rachel was reciting it word for word. Her voice steady, her eyes slightly damp. My parents, slack-jawed with admiration, filmed her like she was Oprah rising from the ashes. She didn't even flinch when she hit the line. Some of us don't get to choose our obstacles, but we all get to choose whether we fight through them. People were nodding, clapping. One lady in the front row even mouthed, "Wow." I sat there frozen, fingers tightening around my phone. I pulled it out slowly, the way you might reach for a weapon you swore you'd never use. My thumbs moved on instinct. I pasted the first few lines of her speech into the Plagiarism app I used all through school, the one every professor told us would be our academic grave if we dared steal a sentence. It took about 20 seconds to come back. 100% match, every damn word. I stared at the screen, numb. Around me, people were tearing up. Rachel had shifted tone now, her voice cracking at all the right places, quoting the part about standing when you want to disappear. I knew she hadn't lived any of it. She wasn't the one pulling 12-hour shifts and sleeping in her car when rent was due. She wasn't the one turning down parties and road trips and every single spontaneous moment of youth because you had to graduate before Sally Mae came knocking. She dropped out. She left. She quit. And now she was stealing my story. Well, not mine technically, but someone's. Someone who earned those words the hard way. And I watched, mouth slightly open, as the auditorium gave her a standing ovation. Students, parents, faculty, everyone but me. When she stepped off the stage, my mother wiped her eyes and said, "That girl's gonna change lives." My dad clapped her on the back and said, "You've always had a way with words, Rach." Meanwhile, I was still sitting there with a 100% plagiarism report glowing on my phone screen. They didn't look at me, not once. Not even a "good job, Jenna," not even a smile. I should have said something right then. I should have stood up, marched to the podium, and read the damn URL where she copied every sentence. But I didn't, not yet. I waited. Because the after party was coming. Because Rachel loved a spotlight. And because if she wanted to play the hero, I was about to show everyone who wrote her script. The party was held at my parents' house, the same white ranch-style place we grew up in, with the creaky porch swing and the driveway that always tilted just enough to make parking feel like a physics test. They'd gone all out, banners that said, "Congratulations, Jenna," in glittery gold letters, folding tables sagging under the weight of catered food, a chocolate fountain I couldn't stop staring at because it felt so wildly out of place. There were fairy lights in the trees, an open bar, even a Bluetooth speaker blasting classic rock covers like this was someone's damn wedding. I stood in the corner for a while, nursing a flat soda and pretending I wasn't planning revenge. People kept walking up to me with soft smiles, saying how inspirational my sister was. One older woman from our church leaned in and whispered, "Your story brought tears to my eyes, sweetheart. I had no idea what you'd been through." I blinked at her for a second, unsure whether to laugh or scream, and then muttered something polite before escaping to the kitchen. Rachel was out on the deck holding court like a seasoned politician. She was surrounded by people, neighbors, extended family, old high school friends who'd reappeared like seasonal allergies, tossing back wine and letting out that high-pitched, effortless laugh she always used when she knew she had an audience. My parents stood beside her, proud and glowing like the parents of a pageant queen. My mother kept adjusting Rachel's necklace like she was 5 years old again and about to perform in a school play. My father offered her a second glass of red and actually said the words, "You always had it in you." I stood just inside the sliding glass door, half shadowed by the curtain, gripping the phone in my hand like it was a grenade I hadn't pulled the pin on yet. There's something uniquely cruel about watching someone who's failed upwards their entire life get praised for an experience they never earned. I thought back to the nights I'd come home from waiting tables with my feet blistered and my back aching, still needing to write a 2,000-word paper before sunrise. I thought about the winter I couldn't afford heat, huddling under 3 blankets while reading by flashlight just to get through like a biology midterm. I remembered crying in a campus bathroom after finding out Rachel had taken the loan money I'd begged our parents to co-sign on and used it to buy a one-way ticket to Oregon with some guy named Chase she met at a music festival. They called it an adventure. I called it theft, but that was the pattern. Rachel screwed up, and I cleaned up the mess. Rachel cried, and the world wiped her tears. She crashed every opportunity and still landed on pillows while I clawed my way through every semester, every shift, every test. And somehow, she was always the one people remembered, the star, the survivor, the voice. I stepped outside after a while, trying not to look like I was storming across the lawn. The air smelled like grilling shrimp and cheap champagne. Marcus spotted me near the cooler and raised an eyebrow. He was wearing a tie, ironically, drinking something too expensive for this crowd, and smirking like he already knew half the story. I walked up, handed him my phone with the report still glowing on the screen, and said, "Read this and tell me I'm crazy." He scrolled through in silence. When he looked up, his smile had dropped. "She really stole the whole thing," he said, not even pretending to soften it. "Every line," I replied, "word for word." He let out a low whistle and passed the phone back. "You gonna tell them?" "I don't know," I said, even though I did. Because it wasn't about humiliation. Not really. It wasn't about making her cry or embarrassing my parents. It was about truth. About being seen. After all these years of being the background character in my own life, I just wanted someone, anyone, to look at me and finally understand who did the real work. Marcus watched Rachel laughing with her arm looped around some cousin we hadn't seen in years. Then he turned to me and said, "You have a loaded gun, Jenna. Don't aim it unless you're ready to shoot." I didn't answer, but I took that as permission. An hour later, Rachel clinked her glass for attention. She was tipsy now, glowing from all the attention. The kind of radiant only someone who's never faced real consequences can manage. She smiled that familiar crooked smile and said, "I just want to say thank you. Today's not just about graduating from school. It's about graduating from who you used to be. And I couldn't have done that without all of you." Everyone clapped. I stepped forward slowly and pulled a bright red envelope out of my bag. Thick cardstock, heavy, intentional. I'd printed the original blog post, the plagiarism report, and the URL source, folded it neatly, labeled it in bold black ink, "Your real diploma." She didn't see me at first, too busy basking in whatever self-made mythology she'd spun for the room. But as I laid the envelope beside her wine glass, her smile faltered just slightly, just enough. She glanced down, confused, then up at me. Our eyes locked for a second. She reached for it, but I walked away before she opened it, before anyone could stop me or ask questions, or ruin the silence I'd just sliced through the evening with. Let her read it on her own. Let her realize, when the room had emptied, when the lights were off and the champagne had gone flat, that I saw her, that someone always had. I walked to the edge of the yard, phone buzzing with some aunt asking where I got my dress, and stared up at the sky. The applause was over, but the show wasn't, not yet. The envelope sat there on the deck table like a live wire, red, sharp, and impossible to ignore. I had placed it without flair, without a single word, just enough pressure behind the act to let her know it wasn't an accident. I walked away calmly, my shoulders square and my face unreadable, and made a deliberate choice not to look back. If she opened it right then, I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing me wait for her reaction. And if she didn't open it yet, then all the better. Let the mystery stretch a little longer, let the tension stew. Revenge, like good wine or revenge essays in the campus paper, needed time to breathe. Inside the house, the noise dulled slightly, just enough for the lights to feel too bright and the music to feel too loud for the weight hanging on my chest. I leaned against the kitchen counter and stared at the half-eaten sheet cake with my name spelled wrong in pink frosting. "Jenna," it said, like an afterthought, like someone had guessed and hoped I wouldn't notice. I thought about the years I spent convincing myself that little things like that didn't matter, that being ignored was just how families sometimes worked, that when people forgot the details of your life, it wasn't because they didn't love you, it was just because they were busy, distracted, overwhelmed by their own noise. But it's funny how the mind catalogs every insult dressed as a mistake. I needed air, but not the party kind, not the laughter-drenched oxygen shared by people who were just drunk enough not to notice anything real. I stepped out to the side of the house, where the lights didn't reach and the night pressed in quieter. Marcus was already there, sitting on a plastic chair like he'd known I'd come looking for solitude. He didn't say anything when I sat next to him, which was why he was the only person I'd told the truth to before now. "She hasn't opened it yet," he said after a while, his eyes fixed on a distant nothing in the dark. "How do you know?" I asked, even though I already knew he was right. "Because if she had, we'd be hearing about it." He paused, then added, "Or watching her pretend like it never happened, which is her other move." I nodded slowly, feeling the truth of that settle in my chest like a stone. I knew Rachel's playbook. I'd grown up studying it, living in the shadows of its pages. She didn't melt down, not publicly. She didn't scream or cry or beg for forgiveness. No, Rachel curated her image like a social media profile, flawless, inspirational, vaguely relatable. If she opened that envelope and realized she'd been caught, she wouldn't explode. She'd pivot. She'd spin the narrative so fast the rest of the room would forget what they saw and only remember how she made them feel. I told Marcus what I'd done to get the original speech, how I'd spent an entire night after the ceremony combing through online essays and forums, trying to trace that opening line until I landed on the blog of a retired army medic who'd written about his recovery from an IED explosion in Afghanistan. His story had gone viral 3 years ago, mostly because of the way he described crawling down a hospital hallway with no legs, dragging his body inch by inch toward a physical therapy room because he said, "I needed to teach my hands how to want something again." That was the line Rachel had used. Word for word, she stood on that stage and repeated it with a trembling voice, letting the weight of it settle on a crowd that didn't know better, hadn't read the story, hadn't cried in a campus library when they first came across it at 3 a.m. like I had. And the worst part was that she knew I'd read it. She knew where I got my inspiration. We talked about it once over coffee, long before she vanished. She knew the story moved me. She knew it mattered, which meant she didn't just steal someone else's words. She stole my moment of connection to something real and used it like a prop. I printed the entire thing, I told Marcus. His original post, the link, the date, the screenshots. I even highlighted her exact quotes. He smiled faintly and said, "So you wrote her a syllabus?" "No," I corrected him, unable to stop myself from grinning. "I wrote her a final exam. The plan, if you could call it that, had always been to let her open it privately. But part of me hoped she'd open it during the party, at the height of her performance, just so I could see the cracks spread across her perfect mask. And yet something in my gut told me she wouldn't. Not until she had time to recalibrate. Not until she could decide how to spin it. And that's exactly what scared me. Because Rachel didn't just deflect blame, she weaponized sympathy. "She's going to try and flip it," I said aloud. More to myself than to Marcus. "She's going to make me the villain." "She'll try," he agreed. "But the truth's still the truth." "I don't want a moral victory," I muttered. "I want them to see her for what she is. I want them to stop looking through me like I'm just filler in her story." Marcus leaned back in his chair, crossing his arm. "Then you're gonna have to speak louder than her for once." And he was right. I'd spent most of my life playing small, keeping my head down, thinking that good work would speak for itself, that quiet integrity was enough. But no one hands you a megaphone just because you've been on patient. If you want to be heard, you have to make noise. Later that night, after most of the guests had gone and the air had thinned with exhaustion, I saw her pick up the envelope. She didn't open it then. She looked at it, held it, turned it over, then she slipped it into her purse. And that told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't going to ignore it. She was going to prepare for it. And the next move was hers. By the next afternoon, the fallout had not yet begun. But the air was definitely starting to shift. It was that thick, unnatural quiet that always comes before a storm, when everyone's still pretending nothing is wrong, but their eyes keep flicking sideways, and their voices are just a little too level. I woke up in my old bedroom, the one with the pale green walls and the crooked shelf still holding my high school trophies, and for a second I thought maybe it had all been a strange, stress-induced dream. But then I rolled over, checked my phone, and saw the message I'd half expected and half dreaded. "Can we talk? Just us, Rachel." No punctuation, no explanation, no hint of apology, just a bland, businesslike request, like she was reaching out to settle a minor disagreement between coworkers, not addressing the fact that she had stood in front of an entire graduating class and stolen a story that didn't belong to her. I stared at the screen for a moment, my thumb hovering over the keyboard, before locking the phone and tossing it across the bed. I went downstairs to find my mother, humming softly in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove like it was just another Sunday, while my father sat at the table, reading the newspaper with a blank expression that said he hadn't seen it yet. I wondered, not for the first time, if either of them would ever ask about the envelope. Neither had mentioned it. Neither had asked why I'd left the party early, why I'd barely said 2 words all evening, why Rachel had suddenly gone quiet and tense. It was like they had collectively agreed to pretend that nothing unusual had happened, as though ignoring it would make it disappear. By the time Rachel showed up, the house was already wrapped in that fake calm that families sometimes build to avoid conflict, like a layer of plastic wrap pulled too tight over something messy and rotting. She knocked on the front door, even though she still had a key, and I knew then that this wasn't going to be a casual chat. She was here for damage control. She stepped inside, dressed in a crisp white blouse and fitted jeans, with her hair tied back in a no-nonsense ponytail that screamed professional clarity. She looked like she'd come straight from a photo shoot for a magazine article called Rebuilding Your Life After Rock Bottom. And for a second, I was almost impressed by the performance. "Can we talk?" she asked again, gesturing toward the backyard, like she'd already planned this little summit. I followed her out, but I didn't sit. She did, crossing one leg over the other with practiced elegance, and then looked up at me with those wide, contrived eyes that she always used when she wanted to seem sincere. "I opened it," she said simply, as though that was supposed to mean something. "And?" I asked, crossing my arms. Rachel exhaled through her nose and nodded slowly, like she was about to deliver a sermon. "Look, I get it. You're upset. You think what I did was wrong." "No," I interrupted, my voice cold. "I don't think it was wrong. I know it was wrong, and you know it too. That's why you didn't open it until everyone left." She bristled slightly, her posture stiffening, but she didn't deny it. "I panicked," she said after a beat. "I didn't think anyone would recognize it. It was just a last-minute thing. I didn't plan to—" "You memorized the entire thing," I cut in. "That's not a panic move. That's preparation. That's performance." She looked away for a moment, then turned back with a different expression, cool, calculating, familiar. "Okay, so what do you want, Jenna? You want me to confess to everyone? Apologize to the whole graduating class? Publicly shame myself?" I didn't answer right away because, truthfully, I hadn't decided. I wasn't sure what would satisfy me. I had already exposed her to herself, forced her to confront the reality she so carefully crafted, but it hadn't changed anything. She was still standing there, polished and polished, spinning the situation like a PR nightmare rather than a betrayal of everything I'd worked for. "I want you to stop pretending you're the hero," I said finally. "I want you to admit that you took something that didn't belong to you, not just the words, the moment, the recognition. You hijacked my day." Rachel stood now, her eyes sharp and glinting. "They were never going to give it to you, Jenna. You could have given the best damn speech anyone's ever heard, and they still would have looked right past you. You know that. You've always known that. You're not built for the spotlight. You don't know how to make people care." I flinched like she'd slapped me, because the worst part was that she wasn't entirely wrong. I'd spent my life hoping that hard work would speak for itself, that quiet resilience would eventually shine through, but in our family, in our town, in the twisted little mythology our parents built around Rachel, it never had. She was the sun, and I was the moonlight, visible only when she wasn't around to burn. "Maybe that's true," I said, stepping forward, voice low. "But I've got something now that you can't perform your way out of." Her eyes narrowed. "You think if you tell everyone they'll turn on me? You think one viral post on a student blog is going to erase what they want to believe about me?" I smiled, slow, deliberate, not warm. "I don't need to turn anyone. I just need to tell the truth and let it sit there, let it rot into their memories." She stared at me for a long time, her expression unreadable, and then she whispered, "They'll never love you like they love me. You'll always be the footnote." "No, Wag," I said, stepping back. "I'm the one writing the damn pages now." That night, I opened my laptop and pulled up the alumni forum. It was small, mostly read by professors and overachievers, but it had reach. I posted the screenshots, the original speech, the timeline. I didn't name her. I didn't need to. I simply wrote, "At my graduation, a guest speaker delivered a beautiful speech on perseverance. Turns out someone else already lived it and wrote every word." I hit publish, and I waited. The post didn't explode the way viral things do in movies. There was no dramatic crashing of servers, no angry mob with pitchforks, and no immediate avalanche of justice sweeping down like a divine reckoning. Instead, it simmered. It circulated slowly, like a rumor in a quiet office, passed from inbox to inbox, screenshotted, whispered about, and shared in carefully phrased emails that always began with, "Have you seen this?" At first, the only sign that it was gaining traction came in the form of silence. Emails that stopped arriving, texts that no longer got replies. That strange, hollow feeling when people suddenly pause just a second too long before saying hello. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't loud. It was that passive, socially acceptable kind of shame that people carry in their eyes when they know something but don't want to admit it out loud. My parents didn't bring it up. Not once. They didn't ask if I wrote it, even though they had to know. They didn't question the timing, didn't acknowledge the fact that Rachel had gone suspiciously quiet for days, didn't mention that the calls from distant cousins and friends had tapered off like a faucet finally turned tight. Instead, my mother started leaving out food on the counter, like when I was little. Sliced fruit, muffins she claimed she baked but clearly bought in bulk. Signals of peace from someone who would rather feed you than face you. My father buried himself deeper in his routine, mowing the lawn twice in the same week and polishing tools that didn't need polishing. I watched them carefully, waited for the crack, for any visible fracture in the fantasy they had built around Rachel's perfection. But if it came, it didn't come from them. It came from Rachel herself. She didn't call, she didn't text. But 2 weeks after the post, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address, no note inside, just the printed blog post from the veteran she had plagiarized, this time with her own handwriting in the margins. Little scribbled notes like, "This line hit me," or "reminds me of that night at the hospital," as if she were trying to rewrite the past through annotations, to stake her claim on someone else's pain by tethering it to her own half-lived anecdotes. I didn't respond. I didn't throw it away either. I left it sitting on my desk like a museum piece, a relic of the exact moment she stopped being invincible in my mind. Somewhere in the midst of all this, I got an email from Dr. Morales, the same advisor who had told me to own the moment before graduation, the one person on campus who had consistently seen me. Not just the grades, not just the transcripts, but me. She had read the post. She hadn't known it was me at first. She admitted that much, but the phrasing, the detail, the quiet fury of it had eventually pointed her in my direction. She wanted to know if I'd be willing to come back to campus to speak at a smaller event, a departmental ceremony for non-traditional graduates, a room full of students who, like me, had taken the long way through school, who had worked 2 jobs, raised kids, battled health issues, or simply refused to quit. I didn't answer right away, not because I didn't want to do it, but because I needed to be sure I could speak without rage, without letting the bitterness twist my voice into something ugly. When I finally stood in front of that smaller crowd, in a modest auditorium with creaky chairs and fluorescent lights that hummed slightly overhead, I didn't feel powerful. I felt exposed. I could see the faces clearly, older students, tired students, students with weary eyes and proud families sitting close. I cleared my throat, and for a second, I thought about using a quote. Something elegant, something memorable, but I didn't. "My name is Jenna," I said, the microphone slightly too close, the sound just a little too loud. "And I'm not here to make you clap. I'm here to tell you how it feels when someone steals your voice, and how damn good it feels to take it back." The room didn't erupt. There were no gasps, no standing ovation, just an attentive, focused quiet. The kind that tells you people are really listening. I talked about what it means to push through the cracks, not in the polished, Instagram inspirational way, but the real kind. How it feels to write papers in the back room of a diner. How it feels to miss birthdays and vacations and sleep just to hold on to a dream nobody else thinks matters. I talked about what it's like to be invisible even when you're doing everything right. How draining it is to keep going when no one claps. How painful it is to be the one who stays behind, who doesn't get to be the story. And I talked, just a little, about my sister. Not by name, not with malice, but as a mirror for how easily people fall in love with a good story, even when it isn't true. Afterward, a woman in her 40s came up to me and said, "You said exactly what I needed to hear. I've been trying to finish my degree for 10 years, and I thought I was the only one who felt like giving up wasn't an option. Not because I'm strong, but because I can't afford to stop." And in that moment, I understood something I had never let myself believe before. The truth doesn't always need to be shouted. Sometimes it just needs to be planted. A week later, I walked past the dining room where my father was watching TV, and he looked up, hesitated, and said, "Heard you gave a good talk. Your professor sent us a link." He didn't say anything else, just looked at me for a long, unreadable moment, then turned back to the screen. And maybe that was his version of a compliment. Maybe it wasn't. I stopped needing to know the answer. Rachel never replied to the envelope I sent her in return. I mailed it 3 days after her annotated copy arrived, with nothing inside but a note that said, "I wrote this one myself. No signature, no explanation. I didn't need to rub it in. I just needed her to know. So maybe this wasn't revenge. Maybe it was something closer to closure. Or maybe, if I'm being completely honest, it was something messier than either. Something in between justice and spite, between forgiveness and the last punch thrown in a long, uneven fight. Because what she took from me that day wasn't just credit or applause. She tried to steal the one thing I had never given away, the right to my own damn story. And now, no matter how many people clap for her, they'll always remember who spoke the truth, because they clapped for her. But they listened to me.